Hello, I'm Dr. Emily Bewley, Director of Veterinary Services for the Kentucky Humane Society. In shelter medicine, every day is different. We never know what animal will need us. But because of you, KHS can be here when animals need us the most. Your support makes miracles happen. Miracles like Mama Malone, a tiny Jack Russell Terrier with a huge pregnant belly. X-rays showed she was carrying 9 babies. When Mama Malone went into labor, she was in obvious distress. It was clear she needed an emergency C-section. It was all hands on deck as we delivered 9 healthy puppies. It took 9 staff members to do what a mother normally would do: remove the sacks and rub each puppy to help them take their first breath. It was adorable to see the staff care for each puppy before giving them to Mama Malone. But many cases are harder for us. We see dogs, cats, and horses that have been neglected, abused, or abandoned. Others are suffering from life-threatening illnesses or injuries. Many are scared and in desperate need of someone to save them. For the most fragile animals, we have a fund called Tender Loving Care, or TLC. Each year, hundreds of animals receive medical or behavioral help because of the TLC fund. By supporting this fund, you give them the second chance they need. By donating, you save them. At just 2 months old, Fancy endured a devastating injury after she crawled under the hood of a car. Her body was viciously torn by the vehicle's fan belt. She suffered lacerations, hearing loss, and a hole in her sinus that made it difficult to breathe. Most shocking, the tiny toes from her left back paw had been torn off by the belt. We gave her IV fluids, pain medications, dressed her wounds, sutured the hole in her sinus, and syringe-fed her. Despite her traumatic injuries, this little kitten was affectionate, making biscuits to show her gratitude. Finally, Fancy was stable enough for a foster home, and that's where she met Abby, who also spent months recovering from injuries caused by a terrible accident. The bond between Fancy and Abby was instant. They seemed to understand each other and to give each other comfort. Now these 2 survivors lean on each other as they continue to heal. Little orphan Andy was born to a free-roaming herd on a remote mountain. When he was less than 24 hours old, he was orphaned. A concerned citizen found him and contacted KHS, and our equine team rushed him to an equine hospital. Andy's prognosis was dire, and he needed intensive care. Finally, Andy was stable enough to come to our Willow Hope farm. Like Andy, Una had also survived starvation and abandonment. This one-eyed senior mare was rescued from a mountain months before, where Una was trying to live off tree bark while nursing her own foal. At Willow Hope Farm, Una became strong and healthy, and her baby became old enough to be weaned and adopted. But Una remained at KHS, where she paced and whinnied whenever she saw mares with their newborns. It was clear Una wanted a baby of her own again, and Andy needed a mother. That's when we had an idea. What if we tried hormone-induced lactation so that Una could be Andy's surrogate mom? We introduced little Andy to Una, and she immediately accepted him as her own. Thanks to the miracle of modern medicine, Una has a new purpose, and Andy has a loving mom. Some of the hardest cases we see are animals that are victims of abuse, animals like Magic. This loving 10-month-old puppy was found by officers with Louisville Metro Animal Services after he had been shot. The way the bullet was angled, he must have been looking at his abuser. The bullet entered above his eye, went through his nasal cavity, and passed through his tongue before breaking his lower jaw. At KHS, we performed emergency surgery to close his wounds, remove fragments of bone and teeth, and repair his tongue. Because his jaw was shattered, he could only eat baby food. Once he was stable and eating on his own, we placed him in a loving foster home with a staff member. He spent months healing not only from his physical injuries, but also his emotional ones. Despite the horrific abuse he suffered at the hands of a human, Magic is a silly, sweet, and snuggly dog who loves everyone he meets. KHS has a special mission to help the most vulnerable animals. That often means taking in injured and ill pets from other shelters that don't have the means to save them. Animals like Preston and his 5 siblings, who arrived at our doors critically ill with highly contagious parvovirus. We suited up in protective gear and rushed these puppies to our parvo ward. It was Preston who worried us the most. He was so weak he couldn't lift his head. Parvovirus attacks the intestines of unvaccinated puppies and is often deadly. Dakota, one of our vet techs, never left Preston's side. But Preston's vital signs continued to drop and his life was on the line. We recruited a brave shelter dog, Conan, to be a blood donor. As if he knew what was at stake, Conan sat patiently as we drew blood from his leg. But even with Conan's heroic efforts, the transfusion wasn't enough. Preston died in Dakota's loving arms. Wiping back tears, our staff knew there was no time to waste. Preston's siblings still needed us. After days of intensive care, the puppies beat this terrible disease, and they were all well enough to enjoy sunshine and play like normal puppies. Charlie, Calvin, Violet, Felix, and May are now living their best lives with their new families. We like to think that their brother Preston is watching over them. I could tell you stories for hours about the animals saved by our TLC fund, some filled with joy, others heartache. What is important is that the lives of every single one of these animals matters, and we will do everything in our power to save them. Now, we ask you to join us in saving lives. Together, we can save innocent animals through tender, loving care. Please donate to our TLC fund to help animals like Mama Malone, Fancy, Una and Andy, Magic, and our little Preston. Thank you.